In this video you will learn a very strong system to fight against the Sicilian defense, the Grand Prix Attack. The Grand Prix Attack offers white excellent practical attacking opportunities. It is very easy to learn and black finds it difficult to resist the pressure. After the move e4, black can play c5, the Sicilian defense. This is one of the best defenses against e4. Black advances with a side pawn, taking control of the d4 square. If white now wants to occupy the center with his pawns, a typical plan is knight f3. After, for example, d6, white can play d4, occupying the center with his pawns. Black responds with c takes d4, eliminating the opponent's central pawn, leaving black with a central pawn majority. This gives black a small positional advantage, as the central pawns are more valuable. For this reason, Grandmaster Bent Larsen believed that the open variation was a positional mistake in order to fight the Sicilian defense. After the move c5, white can play knight c3, entering the so-called closed variation. White develops his queen's knight and increases control over the d5 square. In this way, black will not be able to react in the center with the typical liberating move d5. Black can play knight c6, developing the queen's knight on its natural square and increasing control over the d4 square. White can play f4, to increase control over the central squares. White's plan is to continue with moves like knight f3, bishop c4, kingside castling, d3 and then prepare the kingside attack, probably with the help of the f5 sacrifice. Now, black has several possibilities, but one of his best options is g6, with the idea of developing the king's bishop on the g7 square, to occupy the large diagonal of dark squares, where he will be very well positioned, since it will increase control over the d4 square. White can play knight f3, continuing the development of his pieces. Black can play bishop g7, developing his king's bishop to a good diagonal, increasing control over the d4 square. White can play bishop c4, developing the king's bishop and preparing to castle. White places his bishop on a good diagonal and prepares to attack the kingside. White's plan is to continue with moves like d3, castling and f5, to open lines and attack the opponent's king. Sooner or later black will have to play e6, to block the action of the white bishop, which is a very strong piece. Black's plan is to develop his king's knight on the e7 square, so as not to obstruct the action of the bishop on g7. Then black will be able to castle on the kingside, and in the future he will be able to prepare the break in the center with d5, to free up his position. Now, white can castle, or he can also play f5, sacrificing a pawn, with the idea of opening lines before black has time to organize his position. It is important to make this move before the black knight develops on e7 and can control the f5 square. Black can capture the white pawn with g takes f5. Now, it would not be good to capture on f5 because black responds with d5 attacking the white bishop and black has good play. White responds d3, reinforcing the defense of the e4 pawn and freeing up the action for the queen's bishop, which is now ready to enter the fight. If black continues his development and makes the move knight g to e7, white can castle. Black can castle. White can play bishop g5, completing the development of his minor pieces. Black has difficulties completing his development. White exerts a lot of pressure and has very good attacking opportunities. After the move d3, black can capture on e4, eliminating the opponent's central pawn and getting rid of his doubled pawn. White can capture on e4 with the pawn, to control the d5 square and prevent black's liberating d5 move. White will be able to castle and then attack on the kingside with very good chances. Black can try knight e5, with the idea of exchanging pieces to simplify the position and avoid a possible attack by the opponent. White can capture the black knight, to eliminate the opponent's most active piece. After bishop takes e5, white can play queen h5, bringing the queen into the attack on the kingside and preventing the black queen from going to the h4 square. Now, the black bishop is attacked. It would be a mistake to retreat the bishop to the g7 square, since white plays e5 and has an advantage, as his knight will be able to maneuver to reach the d6 square. After the move queen h5, black can play queen f6, to defend his bishop. White can play bishop d2, completing the development of his minor pieces and preparing to castle queenside. Black can play knight e7, to develop his pieces. White can play rook f1, bringing his king's rook into play and attacking the opponent's queen. Black has to play queen g7, to keep his bishop defended. But now white can play rook takes f7 and get a decisive attack. After queen takes f7, white plays queen takes e5 and the rook on h8 is attacked. Black can castle. White can castle queenside. White can continue with moves like bishop h6, rook f1, etc. and attack the opponent's king. Black can play b6, with the idea of developing the bishop, and thus being able to put all his pieces into play. White plays bishop h6, invading the enemy's castle with the bishop and threatening to capture the enemy rook. White now has a decisive advantage. Black can play knight c6, with the idea of activating the knight and driving the white queen out of the center. After queen d6, black can play rook e8 to defend his rook. Now, white can play rook f1, attacking the opponent's queen. If black plays queen g6, to try to capture the enemy bishop and repel the attack, white plays queen f8 check. And after rook takes f8, rook takes f8 is checkmate. After the move rook f1, black has to play queen e7, to avoid the possible mate on f8 and try to exchange queens to repel the attack. White can play queen f4 taking control of the f8 square. Black can play bishop b7, to move his pieces and connect the rooks. White can play knight d5, incorporating the knight into the attack, threatening to capture the enemy queen and threatening to give check on the f6 square. After e takes d5. E takes d5, black has to resign. For example, after rook f8, white can capture on c6 giving a discovered check. After king h8, white captures the bishop on b7 and is winning. For example, after rook a to b8, white captures on f8 and after the exchanges on f8, he will be able to promote his pawn on b8 and win easily. After the move e takes d5, black can try knight d4. But white can play d6, giving a discovered check and wins easily. We have learned the Grand Prix Attack game scheme, which is a very strong and aggressive game system against the Sicilian Defense.